Okay, sounds like we're live. Hello, everyone. Great to have you here. This is our second episode of AI Office Hours, and excited to dig in. I think today we have a really good group. We're going to talk a lot about data, kind of licensing IP. There's obviously a lot of news happening around this topic with everything that's going on in AI. So let's start with introductions. Whitney, do you want to start? Then Shu, then Leo, and then we can dive
Sure.
in. And this is also an opportunity for you guys to ask questions, to me and each other as well.
Great. Well, Illia, thank you for having us. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here. My name is Whitney. I'm the CEO of Ringfence, and we're building the data monetization layer for AI. We've been building for about a year now, and our first platform, our creator platform, Escher, is set to go live here in about a month.
Nice.
Awesome. Uh, Go ahead, sure.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the invitation, Ilya, and I'm glad to be here and meet everyone here. So my name is Shu. I'm founder of Mizu. Mizu is actually building the first synthetic open data layer, which aims to create the most open and collaborative synthetic data layer, like to serve for the big mission of big like open source AI. And we are targeting to launch our testnet in August. So like looking forward to everyone like to join the network and try it out.
Thank you, Shu, and thank you, Whitney. Hi, I'm Leo. Great to be here. I'm the founder and CEO of Supersite. And essentially, what we're building at Supersite is a network of decentralized AI oracles. And the problem that we're trying to solve is hallucination. So, whenever you actually ask a natural language question of a large language model, like any of those today, such as ChatGPT or Perplexity, the problems that you face is essentially like you don't get the right answers to the questions because these are usually based on semantic search when they do implement like modern RAG. And essentially, what we do is we use real databases to answer questions. So we're building a network of databases that are linked to models to answer each question that requires data. And we're super excited to be here today. And thank you so much for inviting us, Ilya.
For sure, yeah. So the idea was to get kind of a group of folks that are working on different aspects of data, kind of in this decentralized space, because there's a lot of going on, right? I mean, obviously we've seen the Scarlett Johansson thing. There's Sony going out and suing people for using their data. So I'm curious how you guys think about kind of the space. Obviously, from licensing to like how synthetic data plays a role, how search plays a role. So I'm curious, kind of how you um, overlook at this, and also what questions do you think are important to be answered, and so we can actually discuss that.
I'm happy to jump in on the Scarlett Johansson topic because this problem was essentially what led us to starting Ringfence. You were seeing all of these lawsuits pop up with OpenAI and Stable Diffusion getting sued by different content creators or the New York Times, and it just speaks to this challenge that we face right now, and that is that all of these models that have been trained with other people's data, and those people haven't been given attribution or any kind of compensation. And Web3 is a nice solution to begin to fix this problem moving forward. But the Scarlett Johansson situation was wild because she directly rejected the request to use her voice, and then it was used. And then Sam Altman tweeted out her as kind of a shot across the bow. And if you've seen her, it was certainly her voice, right? But I think that moving forward, what's going to happen is that people are going to start paying attention to how they are putting their content and their data out into the world, and they're going to look at how they can protect it. And we've heard for so many years now that our data is valuable. Only none of us have ever realized the value of that data, right? Like I can't think of one story where someone has said, "My data paid my rent last month." And we need to get to a point where people can realize the monetary value of their data. And I think that we're 3 to 6 months away from starting to open that door to give people the benefit of the data that they're putting out into the world just by living their life and using the internet.
Those are some great points, Whitney. It's super interesting that you mentioned this, actually. So I've been thinking about this deeply, like in terms of a philosophical like concept. So essentially, like the way that centralized entities are working today is they're fully focused on acceleration, and they don't care about the cost of acceleration. And this is clearly displayed upon even, like, for example, just neglecting Scarlett Johansson's basic rights of like sharing her voice, just neglecting that completely, and using a model that has her voice despite all of that. So it's essentially like what we're seeing today is like centralized entities have adopted this like viewpoint that acceleration at no cost is necessary, and at all costs. And essentially, like we don't really know if that's the right way to go about building a system that is able to answer all questions in the world, or like even AGI. Essentially, is this the right way to go about it? We don't know yet. And what crypto essentially offers us is like a primitive for us to be able to like incentivize the contributions from people, as you rightly mentioned, to monetize their own data, and like hook into like different networks to be able to like be involved in the contribution of, I guess, one of the most greatest innovations of not just our generation but of all time. And so essentially, like that's how I've been thinking about it. Like as we grow as a space, like it's really fundamental for us to contribute to the development of AGI, because like we can't let like a profit-seeking entity own AGI and like decide like how the world is going to play out. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on it, Shu, as well, and Ilya.
Yeah, so we're thinking that in a different perspective. Basically, I know like the centralized entities, they definitely like kind of like doing this kind of things in their own minds and are not care about the cost. But we're thinking more about like what if they want to open source the thing like they want they built, and what the blocker there. And the one big problem we're seeing here is that actually a lot of data in current stage cannot be open sourced at all. For example, like Llama 3 is trained using like definitely like using some common public data like Common Crawl, but also use a lot like private data, right? And this kind of private data can never be open sourced. It's not like about like if they want to or not, because like regulations or user consents, all these kind of legal issues. So what we're thinking is like, imagine like we want to achieve to this kind of AGI space and want to build a fully open source AI ecosystem, and then like how the open data layer would look like. That's why we're so focused on synthetic data. We believe that only synthetic data can be open sourced because it has no like license issue or copyright issue or IP issue. Actually, not a lot of people have linked the synthetic data part with the open data part. There is using synthetic data part to solve the data scarcity problem, but we see the potential of that could be in openness. And eventually, I believe, imagine we have this kind of a very large language model, which is completely open sourced with open data layer, and it has to be synthetic, or it has to like license free or copyright free, risk free. Yeah. So that's what we're thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, all of those good points, and obviously agree a lot on kind of, we need a alternative, we need a user-owned AI as an alternative for kind of the for-profit generation AI models that optimizing for success of single company. And I do want to zoom in into synthetic data a little bit later, but I actually want to take a little bit of controversial stance, which is, well, let's imagine that they actually did find an actress and a voice that sounds similar to Scarlett Johansson, but is different. And they have literally, paid somebody to record this voice. And so now we're actually in a weird situation where, like, what is too similar? And also, like, there's a bunch of inputs went into this model that actually obviously was trained on Scarlett Johansson at some point, because I'm sure they fed a bunch of videos across the internet to it. And so kind of at which point should they be filter this out, right? And how, what is similar, like what does too similar even mean? And so I think there's an interesting, I would say, failure mode that we see right now in the kind of legal system in general, because copyrights were invented back in 1700s. They were invented on the kind of foothills, time things were moving slower back then, so but of the invention of printing press. And a lot of it is kind of designed to be like, this is a content somebody produced and now you consume it, right? And there's a copyright law protecting this. But we're now in a generative age, right, where there's a model that consumes a lot of different content and recombines it and reconstructs it. And now it's really kind of the standard like plagiarization systems don't apply anymore to these models because they can recombine them in such novel ways. So I actually think there is a massive shift that's happening where the existing copyright laws are just like not able to handle. And as part of this, we do need a new system. So I actually agree with you, Whitney, that like we need a new IP tracking. We need a new way of licensing it. We need a new way to compensate people for creating new content. And it needs to be going directly, right? It cannot go through this existing distribution platforms and publishers because they just become pretty much data aggregators and resellers and kind of taking their own cut for not much additional value. So, but kind of crypto here is more of a facilitator now instead of the existing legal system that kind of, relying on this outdated approach of measuring the attribution.
Right now on Hacker News, there is another story trending where there's this singer Tom Waits, and he had a very similar situation that Scarlett Johansson is in right now, where they aired the song which sounded like his song, and the voice sounded like his voice, but it was a different person. So he won that particular case. So there's a precedent.
Yeah, there's a couple of these out there. I mean, Ed Sheeran was sued a while back for having a sound that was similar to other artists, and in court he actually played, I think it was over 100 songs that use the same chords to show how imitation and something sounding similar are very different. And something that we talk about often is what's the difference between AI generating a piece of art that's similar to Pablo Picasso and an artist actually painting something with Picasso as their inspiration. If you're able to figure that out, then I think there's something to be said. But I think that really what the focus for us has always been is how do we move forward? Like how from here do we start to set the tone for not only copyright and IP, but how your content, your data is able to be protected into the future. I don't know that we're ever going to have any way to fix the damage that's been done since Pandora's box has been opened. But I think that, crypto as it is about self-sovereignty. And if we can start to teach people how to be more self-sovereign with every aspect of their life, their data included, then we're off to a good start.
I'd like to just share some thoughts actually. I think in my understanding, the copyright is actually to protect the data, not to protect the person. For example, like I write a book, the book could be the ownership of the book of IP could be transferred from one person to that person, right? It's not like necessary to be the writer of the book. It could be anyone. So the ultimate, the copyright is basically protecting the ownership. And ownership is actually necessary, it's not very native concept, right? Like read, write, own, right? Own is one of the most important part of that. And I don't have an answer that if Web3 is actually facilitating the system, or it's kind of like building a brand new system on top of this. But let's say imagine a very extreme case, like I think you mentioned this kind of the voice case that Scarlett Johansson has this kind of voice, right? Imagine there is another person who has exactly the same voice with Scarlett Johansson, and they both own the voice, right? There's two people on the voice. In that case, can you buy the voice from another person, skipping Scarlett Johansson? It's basically what is protecting here. Are you protecting the person? Are you protecting the voice? Eventually, I think we will need ownership, that system that who will decide who owns the voice. Maybe they share the voice. They share 50% of this kind of voice, right? And then all you need is basically to define the ownership of the data or the voice, and then you make some decision process on top of that. I think that's eventually how it looks like. But that's just my thoughts. I don't have exact number of that, but some this kind of imagination on top of this. Yeah.
But isn't it the case that both in Scarlett Johansson's case and in Tim Waits' case, it was actually a different person who was doing the voice, right? It is still the case that there was an attempt to impersonate the person with the original voice. So it doesn't matter whose voice is actually being played.
I think the ownership itself is a social thing. It's a society thing. It depends on the society. So I own a house. Who decided I own a house? Actually, it's actually the government decides I own a house, right? I cannot say I own this house because this kind of ownership thing is actually defined by the society structure, by the government, not by myself. Yeah. So the voice thing, I think, is the same. Eventually, the society has decided who owns the voice. Either no one owns the voice, it becomes a public good, or because Scarlett has this kind of higher reputation, then society decided, okay, you own the voice because you actually promote the voice to be like, no, we're known by the word. So it may become like super complex. It's not like native built-in thing, like it's growing with you. It's like other people decides who belongs to what, that kind of thing.
I mean, I think I would like to take a moment to contradict you here. I think there's two schools of thoughts. So essentially, one school of thought is like what we own is dictated by like the societal rules, and the other school of thought is essentially we are sovereign owners of what we own. Essentially, like we should own our voice, we should own our ideas, we should own our thought. So I think these are two different schools of thought, and so, I mean, I completely understand your perspective from the first school of thought, but from the second school of thought, again, like if, for example, like you had bought like the voice that sounds similar to Scarlett's voice, and you had actually bought it from a real person, then from the second school of thought, this would have been a valid way to go about solving the problem. But yeah, I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, like Illia, Alex, and Whitney, like, because I mean, it's very fundamentally different perspectives. One is societies should set the rules of ownership, and the second is essentially we ourselves should set the rules of ownership.
I mean, I think that it's a combination, right? Because we are like we do want self-sovereignty, but we are living in a society, and so although like we're trying to push as much as possible for each individual to be self-sovereign, but at the end there is still a consensus around that, and like be that social consensus or a on-chain consensus with with nodes or intersubjectivity, right, which is like economic consensus around something that's subjective. And so I think that the reality is what I'm kind of leaning more is actually we need a different model for rewarding people for their data, right? Because some of this data is just out there. Like you cannot, like, by the fact that you spoke on the street, you cannot take it back, right? The fact that somebody recorded it and then now you're saying like, oh, nobody can use it, but it was they were walking past and they recorded you speaking. Like there is kind of all of this conflicts, and so what we need is a novel model of going back and actually attributing. The challenge is some of the folks proposing to kind of evaluate based on hey, this voice is used in ChatGPT, so we should attribute it to Scarlett Johansson and whoever actor that was recorded. And the challenge with that is actually it's very computationally intensive, right? If you actually, you don't know who that people is, you need to score every single person, how likely their voice, how close it is to matching. And so instead, and I actually think this is very healthy for in general our world, is transitioning off this kind of attention economy where we attribute and reward based on how much attention, how much times it's used, or how many views the article gets, or how many plays it gets. We need a new way, a new metric to define how valuable something is, based on then later it's been used in machine learning model, been recombined, and been used in various ways across different applications. And so I have some ideas of how that can actually work, but that's kind of a direction where we're moving away from, again, copyright is protecting data, it's protecting ownership, but it's protecting kind of the artifact that people consume. And the problem is the artifact here that people consume are now model output. And this model has, pretty much seen probably millions of voices, right? And yes, it's like they parameterize it to output something specific, but it has seen like so much different data. And you like going now, by Sony and saying like, hey, take everything out that we've copyrighted is like extremely complicated, right? It's like, well, what about the image where there is a, I don't know, whatever their character is, like on top of somebody's digital art, on top of somebody's new creative work. Like it's super complicated, and so we need, I think, a different model that's like scoring and rewarding the creators at the time of creating and contributing this data, and then allowing models to recombine all this data and create kind of novel experiences for people.
That sounds really reasonable, especially given the world that we are in currently. What it sounds like is essentially you're proposing a completely new primitive, such that like whenever anything is created, like the potential for monetization is already set and the rules are set. And then like how much like the level of monetization is depends on how much attention that piece actually gathers. And so essentially, like if this primitive were like assumed to be fully applied, then what that means is, for example, all of the data that we give Apple, for example, like through our smartphones to like train their recommendation engines, we would be able to also like I guess like earn in contribution in proportion to our contributions personally to the recommendation algorithm, for example. I mean, this is super interesting as a concept, and we'd love to learn more.
Yeah, I think Whitney, you're working a lot of this direction, right?
We are, yeah, and it's a really good point, Leo. So I think one of the main things here is that data pricing is a bit opaque right now, because essentially it's just being done business to business. You don't have individuals being able to place value on their own data. You essentially have companies that are bundling all of this data together and then offering it for sale to different companies. Somebody who wants to sell you, or provide ads, or Apple who wants to use this for UX, UI improvements. But the numbers come down basically to this: your data, your personal profile data, is worth about $600 per year right now, sold to just Google and Meta, right? When you extrapolate that out over all of the companies and platforms and services that you use on an annual basis, it gets considerably higher. But the challenge right now is that there's not a place for your data to aggregate in a meaningful way, to where some company can find you and get this data in an anonymized fashion to where you feel protected, which is essentially what we have been working towards. And there's challenges to that, but Web3 does solve, and crypto solves some of these challenges, right? Account abstraction is a very big thing. It's an important thing. If you're going to be compiling someone's entire data profile for, let's say, a whole year's internet usage, you want to make sure that you're not attaching your name and address to all of that as well, right? But on the other side of this, it also allows you as the user to determine who can get access to your data. Like, maybe I don't want to see ads, so I don't offer my data for sale to those kinds of companies. And on the flip side of that, maybe I do, because it's going to afford me an incremental amount of additional money every year that I can put towards something that I enjoy. So this is it's a big problem, and probably better said, it's a big opportunity. The old cliche was that everyone got into crypto, you got in for the gains and you stayed for the tech. And I think that now we're seeing this wave again. But with data, it offers such a massive opportunity for people to capture additional value every year just off of living their life, that they've missed up to this point. And over the course of your lifetime as an adult, you're looking at potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in missed revenue directly to your pocket that you're giving up for the data that you're freely providing to a lot of the apps and services that you use. So I think there's a huge opportunity to recapture that and to let people see that value.
So I actually want to shift gears a little bit and kind of take the opposite here, which is, I mean, right now there's the large language models, for example, require about 1,000 times to be shown some fact to actually remember it accurately. And so we have this huge data gatherers, right, that require 15 trillion tokens, for example, to be trained. And so to give you, for the audience, the idea, Wikipedia is about 2 billion tokens. So English Wikipedia is 2 billion tokens. So it's 75,000 times Wikipedia right now shown to these models for them to actually remember things and be able to reason. And so this is where I think synthetic data is interesting, because it's pretty much taking the existing data, right? For example, Wikipedia, and recombining it many times. But the other side is, can we make these models more effective at training from a small amount of data where you don't need as much, and then users' data can stay private, and potentially combine it in a different way, in a more kind of specific way, versus just just throw billions of hours of YouTube and trillions of tokens of text into this model and hope it learns how to figure everything out. I'm sure Shu, you've been thinking a lot about this, how both synthetic data benefits with training right now, but also what are the ways this can actually go forward?
Yeah. So we are thinking about how we can generate data by AI and then feed into AI again. So let AI to train AI. I think that ultimately that's the way. It's not the case. It's because AI itself is not AGI yet. It's not that smart. So you need people to keep putting intelligence into the system as a positive feedback loop. I was in a lecture and I was listening to a speech from a professor from MIT, who was the youngest professor in MIT in neuroscience. And he made a very, very good point. He says that actually he believes that AGI will be there in 18 months to 5 years, which is quite optimistic. Yeah. But he made one point that we should do everything now. We should do everything just to assume AGI is already there. So that's something we're actually following here. We assume AGI is already there. Assume AGI is already there. How are you going to do this kind of model training? You're going to let AGI to produce more knowledges there, and then use AGI to train AGI, right? You got AI to train AI, just the people will learn and then teach other people. That's how it works. So we're thinking imagine if we can, for example, generate whatever data we want from AI directly and generate high quality data. In that case, it'll solve all the problems. Now what we're doing is literally primitive gathering and hunting, and in that case it becomes industrial mass production. Yeah, that's what we're thinking about. The biggest challenge here is that the AGI data actually generated data is not as high quality as we expect, because it has illusions. You don't know what the intelligence boundary of this kind of AI models are. So you will have to, for current synthetic workflows, you have to add a lot of these kind of validations or checks, or even human reviewers necessarily to do this kind of job, to ensure the quality is as high as enough. But this kind of reviewing is very different from data labeling. For data labeling, it's very labor intense. You hire someone from some other country who have no knowledge of AI to do this kind of labeling for you. But for this kind of thing, you have to really collect the intelligence, because this kind of thing they have to understand what AI is saying. They have to tell if the AI is telling the correct thing or not. You have to really focus. Even sometimes you have specific domain knowledge to do these kind of things. So I think we will have to shift from this kind of labor intense labeling to intelligence intense labeling, plus this kind of synthetic data workflow. They will help solve this kind of data scarcity problem. Yeah, that's my hunch.
Shu, I just have a follow-up question, if I may. Right now, how are you thinking about the flippening, if you want to call it that, of real data versus synthetic data? How far away do you think we are from that point where synthetic becomes the primary source?
Sorry, I lost you for 3 seconds. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So with regards to right now, real data seems to have more value than synthetic data in training AI. How far out do you think we are from that flipping and synthetic data taking the lead spot?
I would adopt that real world data has more valuable than synthetic data, because there are tons of different types of real world data. There is personalized social data. This kind of data is actually not contributing to the intelligence level of large language model. If you dump that into large language model, it's not helping improving the intelligence level, and it's not helping the performance. What is more used for is basically as a RAG. For example, your personalized data, you can use that as a RAG indexed local to serve as this kind of AI agent stuff, right? So different data serve different purposes. if you want to improve the intelligence level of this kind of large foundation model, you really have to input this kind of knowledge. And knowledge is Wikipedia's knowledge. And this kind of paper, from the website is knowledge. Social data is not knowledge. So I think synthetic data will play a critical role in foundation model training, because we hope it can generate some knowledge from that, but it's hard for now. Yes, yeah. So yeah, and real world data is that I said it cannot be open sourced. Why we need open source? When we want to build open source AI, we want knowledge pattern to be open source. We don't want the data itself to be open source, right? So it's like not that sensitive at all. Yeah, that's I think the ultimate goal. Like the foundation model and synthetic data, they will be serving more this kind of foundation model thing, and the personalized social data, they will serve more for like personalized agent. And there is a middleware, there's some agent. There's some agents serving for different purposes. If serving for a general purpose, like it could be like more synthetic. If we're serving more personal use cases, then it could be more real world. That's what I think about the whole like landscape and space.
Thank you. It's great.
That makes a lot of sense. What you said actually makes a lot of sense. We found synthetic data to actually be super useful as well, like especially like the way that we use it at Supersite right now is essentially like we fine-tune smaller models for specific tasks by creating data sets from the larger language models. So essentially, what we did was essentially create a large data set of SQL codes using GPT-4, and then we fine-tuned Llama 3 for the same task and essentially made it cheaper. So like this whole process of teaching smaller language models like a very specific set of knowledge from bigger language models, when you have a very defined like domain space, it works really well in our experience. So I mean, we definitely agree that there's something like very promising when it comes to synthetic data, and like as we move forward, like we're going to move a lot from human data collection to human data being used for synthetic data, and then synthetic data collection. So it's super interesting that you bring up these points.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very good point. That's called knowledge distillation, right? You distill knowledge from a smarter model with GPT-4 to a not that smart model, like small language model. That's very common use case. But like more challenging things, like if we can use synthetic data to push the boundary of the intelligence level of the smartest model, that's super hard. Yeah, I think, but like it has like a lot of these kind of use cases. The use case you mentioned is actually the major use case right now. Yeah.
Alex, you wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, I'm researching how legal it is to use output of GPT-4 to train models. Yeah, I found it specifically. You cannot do it. You cannot do it if you compete with OpenAI.
Exactly. So, yeah. That's a terminal service. That's why we need open source AI. This kind of, we need the smartest open source AI that can help us to do these kind of things. It's free to use.
Yeah, I mean, I think my aspect here, obviously coming from training some of these models, is just the fact that you need to show 1,000 times the same thing. To me, seems extremely suboptimal, right? The fact that you take smaller model, right, what you said, and you're training it on output of bigger model. I mean, there's like a few effects that are happening there, but including like if you have access to actually bigger model, like actual execution, you can take the logits from a softmax and you can train on that. That actually provides way more signal than pure like token feeding. And so you can actually have like way better knowledge distillation that way. And this is actually how like we train like way smaller models to serve, for example, at google.com, where you have like huge latency requirements back in the day. And the challenge here again is like, it means that we are really bad at training these models, right? It means that this smaller model is actually able to know all of these facts, but we've not managed to show it the data in the right way and update its parameters for it to actually memorize it, right? And a really good example actually is Llama 3, the 8B, which they train on 15 trillion, right? Which usually people don't do, right? Usually it's trained on like 2 billion, 3 billion, on 15 trillion tokens, and usually it's trained on 2-3 trillion. And the fact that this like outperforms models that were trained on 2-3 trillion tokens, right? And so, and the general fact that like 7-8 billion parameter models have been improving over time, even though it's a fixed size of parameters, right? It's fixed size of capacity, but they've been able to kind of improve on all the benchmarks over time. It just shows that we're like so bad at training these models. And so my actually question is, can we leverage, potentially synthetic data, potentially better optimizers, but also just generally kind of our creativity as crypto community of creating a different model of organizing people to figure out how do we solve this problem, which is how do we train models with less data more effectively so that they're smarter and able to memorize and kind of also reason about this more effectively. Alex, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to say that it's not that surprising that it keeps on improving, right? Like if I learn a piano piece, if I do it 20 times, I get better and better at it. So it's not surprising that, yeah. It doesn't take me 1,000 times, right? So it is not that sample efficient, but it's not surprising that it's.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you need to show it a few times, right? And again, like because you want it in different contexts, you want to understand the relationships. So like, I'm not saying it needs to go down to like from one case you like completely understand everything, but just like the kind of the idea here that there's this really good paper around studying like physics of LLM. It's like a series of papers actually, and they analyze a lot of this like differences. And I mean that's kind of what I'm really excited about. Like, what are the approaches we can take here to really drive down the kind of data requirements to train these models?
But with synthetic data, is your thinking like, let's keep model inefficient, but fix? You know, like we don't have 1,000 examples. We're going to generate 1,000 examples, and so instead of fixing the model, we will fix the inputs.
No, I was more thinking with synthetic data, one idea would be to generate data that's better, that these models are better at consuming, right? So this can be like way cleaner. So that actually paper on the physics of LLM, they generate the data set, which is like taking tuples of facts and pretty much generating them. And so like, what can you do? Like, let's say you take Wikipedia and you want to build just from Wikipedia the best model that can like answer, most of the questions. Like, what is that you can do to make it more effective at learning from that data set with, generating synthetic data, maybe distilling something, maybe reprocessing it differently?
The way that I've been thinking about it is, I mean, you're absolutely right. So using synthetic data, we can build much cleaner data sets, and the more specialized your data set is for the task, the better the model you can get. So that's one way to go about it. The second thing that I've been thinking deeply about is essentially you don't need to build the world's largest model that solves every problem like known to man, but instead, like if we can essentially categorically break down tasks or like, for example, segments, then we can have domain specific models that operate in union. And essentially, like all you have to build is essentially a matching engine which matches user's query with the appropriate submodel, which will be able to generate the answer to the question that you're looking for. And this is essentially like what we're trying to do at Supersite with like domain specific models for different kinds of data, so that like if you have any questions for like different data, then you can ask them at Supersite, and then there will be like different submodels working. So I mean, the crux of this is essentially like, firstly, we want better training data, but secondly, also like if we can have like thousands of different models like that are hyper specialized for different tasks, be it data related or not, then essentially we can like if we get them to work in communion, then we can like also like generate like, I guess, clearer answers than centralized models can like create. So that's my thinking about it.
In my opinion, I feel like the data quality is definitely like, way more important than data quantity. So all we need is high quality data. Yeah. So I think I read the paper, I don't remember the details, but like they trained the model with, I think, 100 megabyte data. The other one, high quality 100 megabyte data. The other one is like,
Textbooks is all you need.
Yeah. So the problem becomes like how we can encourage the community to build high quality data sets and to train these kind of models, right? And I don't know, like personally, I'm kind of like a data infra background. I'm not like super knowledgeable in this kind of machine learning and AI training part. But I think openness definitely can help in this kind of use cases. Basically, if you can open the data and let community to collect the intelligence to contribute, find a mechanism to do that, and that would be super cool, because I think Web3 is basically the correct way to do that. And another part is very challenging, is basically how we can verify the quality of the data is high or not, or even like how we can verify if the model is performing good or bad. If that, I think is still like a big problem, like for the industry, right? I was like thinking about like building a very cool data set. It's called trick the model. If you can trick the model to let the model to model in some like nonsense stuff, you win, because you actually are finding the boundary of the large language model. If you find the boundary of the intelligence, right? It doesn't know this kind of thing. And then if you can collect all these kind of boundaries, then you find a way, you have a direction to keep improving the model to the next level, to expand the boundaries. So that's something like I'm thinking about, but you cannot do that by a single team, by a centralized team like Meta, right? You want to encourage the community to involve in this kind of process to help you to do these kind of things, because it has to be very diverse. It has to cover all these kind of domains, and only the community can do that. Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. How this should happen.
Sounds like we should build this on Near. We actually have some kind of an example of this. It's called Shield GPT, and it's designed for users to trick the model to pretty much sell one token and buy another token. And so it's actually an infinite game, because people just rebalance all the meme coins in the vault by pretty much tricking the model and like convincing it that it should pretty much switch. So you can have something like this, which is fun, like economical, is infinite game, and actually generates data on the other side, which is useful because you actually see how to jailbreak the models or how to find vulnerabilities in their reasoning.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should gamify the process and build a product on top of that. Just let people to find the boundary of these kind of models. Yeah, that would be like super, I think, meaningful and valuable.
There was a question in the YouTube live chat, which is, can crypto somehow help in the accurate versus probabilistic LLM problem? I'm assuming it's related to, Leo, you mentioned some of the hallucination, but also just like the LLMs at the end are right now statistical system, right? It's kind of gives you like an average of sometimes just what Reddit thinks is true. So I'm curious how you are thinking about it, but also how everybody else thinks about this problem.
That's a great question. So, I mean, the way that we've been thinking about it is essentially like if you could pose the same question to like different submodels at the same time that are like hyper specialized to similar kinds of data, and then you ask that question, and then essentially when these models generate the answer to that question, you come to consensus on the answers from the submodels, and essentially like you can even like slash their stakes, and like you can essentially find a mechanism to award people for accuracy, and then also like slash their stakes in case they're inaccurate. And so like different submodels working in communion to generate answers is definitely one way to solve the problem. It does get slightly more expensive because like you are inferencing from multiple models at the same time, but you can increase the accuracy. So this is one way that I've been thinking about in terms of like solving this problem. So the other aspect of this is essentially like a lot of language models, they like hallucinate because they don't actually have the access to the data while answering the question. And so, for example, like if you were to ask anything about Near's blockchain data on Perplexity, then essentially like it would hallucinate while giving you the answer because it doesn't actually have that blockchain data. But instead, like if you had a model hooked up to the blockchain data that was posing the question off of the data, then essentially you would get a much more accurate answer for that question. So these are the two ways that we've been thinking about it at Supersite. So first is like consensus of different models, and second is like integrating them with the actual underlying data to generate the answer. But we'd love to hear like your thoughts as well, like how you would think about this space, and it would be super helpful for us to learn.
Yeah, I'm curious what other folks are thinking on this question.
I personally don't have opinion on this because I don't know how to answer this specific question, because why I'm confused, like why we need to use crypto to solve this kind of accurate and probabilistic problem at all. Like I kind of like don't understand the motivation behind this kind of question. So I would like leave the questions to others. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so here's kind of my thinking here, fewfold, right? One is you have an opportunity to use, for example, crowdsourcing to indeed find places where the model is not accurate. And I mean, in a way, like what you were describing, Shu, before is so-called curriculum learning, right? Where you can actually find the limits of the model and then potentially try to get more training data for those examples for that scope of knowledge. I think the other side of this is indeed where models just making up stuff or kind of averaging out the information. And so that's where things are more interesting. I think there's a few aspects, right? Kind of similar to what Leo's describing. There's an opportunity to have lots of different, more specialized models, which are maybe more either have access to data or for fine-tuned or whatever kind of they were designed to answer better at specific types of questions. So, imagine you take the mixture of experts that's right now inside one model, but actually now you put them on different servers and you incentivize them to actually be distinct and different and specialized in different areas. And so you can have a crypto kind of network of experts that, one of them is better at medical, one of them is better at blockchain data, one of them is better at, math and physics. And then you can combine and ask them, and kind of they can also communicate with each other. Now, and then again, there's like a value function evaluation system that relies on human labeling as well to give you feedback. I think going beyond that is some of the model architecture that I've been thinking as well, is like, how do we use more compute when it's needed, right? Sometimes these models are like you ask it 2+2 and you ask it to, design a plan to start a company, and it spends exactly the same amount of compute for these two problems, right? If for 2+2, it, spins up, 10 to 25th floating point operations. And for like a super complex problem that has a lot of different, questions to ask, it'll exactly, spend the same amount of compute. So how do we, kind of use different amount of compute depending on the complexity of a task? How do we have more ways for model to understand where it's either not confident, and actually being able to to ask more questions instead of trying to like latch on into the directly answering. And this is again where some of the fine tuning right now, like all of the fine tuning is the confident answer. I don't think fine tuning data has like, I don't actually know, please give me more input. So this is where having some of this ways to do like effective crowdsourcing or engaging community to give you kind of inputs will be important. But beyond that, yeah, like we also need just architectural improvements. I mean, honestly, like I'm stunned by the fact that we have, I mean, pretty much the same model plus minus like regularization and activation functions that just kept around for so many years, and we have not had like a major kind of improvements over that.
It's kind of crazy to think about, like the fact that you mentioned that even the simplest problems and the most complex problems are going to like rely on mechanisms that use similar levels of compute. That seems like a very like deep structural problem in the space, and also it seems very wasteful. So I think that, I mean, innovation there is going to be super important as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the chain of thought and some other approaches are kind of, trying to fix that, as well as, ways to, pipe one agent into another agent and stuff like this. Like all of this are kind of like patches on top of this idea. But I think, yeah, like fundamentally there needs to be kind of, some upgrade on the architecture. But yeah, like to actually achieve that, we need to coordinate a lot of efforts and resources to, make that possible and available for folks.
But I think generally the adoption of techniques is relatively slow. Like if you think about mixture of experts, it's been around for a while before everybody started using it, right? And the same, like, it's been 2 months since a mixture of depths from DeepMind. I just Googled around and it doesn't look like it's making too much, that doesn't generate too much discussion. But like, that's definitely an approach. So it could be that just it's being adopted slowly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. And I mean, even for transformers, right, it took a couple of years before like it started kind of to be leaned on. It takes like multiple confirmations from different pretty much parties before people actually like start to lean into some technique, which is potentially actually an interesting place for crypto to incentivize, where, as new paper comes out, actually incentivizing different research labs to replicate research and kind of, recombine it in some way and confirm indeed that these results stand, right? Because even though right now, well, first of all, there's a lot less open source AI code right now coming out from these big labs. And so the whole replicable research that kind of computer science started is not going in a good direction. But I think that's an interesting opportunity as well. Like we have, potentially some of these decentralized compute marketplaces which can offer some compute to try the models and at the same time have like more, academia and projects to replicate some of this research to indeed like validate that these techniques are working or not.
I have one question actually for you, for Illia. Yeah. So when I like kind of like explaining the open source AI concept to my friends, and they are kind of like skeptical about the idea. I'm fully believing that, but they're skeptical because they believe that, hey, well, even like you open source the Llama 3, right? You open source the data, open source the training process. Like the people, like the community cannot try out on that because they cannot like train this kind of thing from scratch. It costs a lot of GPUs, a lot of resources. Even you have this kind of insights, it's like super like hypothetical driven. Basically, like you have this kind of concepts, you have this kind of thoughts, you want to try it out, you don't have the resource. So how to solve this kind of problem? Like how crypto can solve this kind of problem better, that it can incentivize people to try out different things without restricted by the resource. And even like the community or some like very cool developer know, oh, I think this kind of neural structure, or I think this kind of data can help to improve the performance of the model. I want to try it out. Like I can get this kind of, for example, like consensus from the community and get support from the community, and then like I can try it out by myself and let the community to decide like if I want to move on or not. That kind of mechanism is something I'm looking for. I feel like very promising, that a big thing like Web3 can provide. Just like to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think that argument valid, that for now, or do you think like how can we build a better mechanism to support this kind of like better future?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually something we've, as Alex, been discussing for a bit now, which is how do we enable kind of faster experimentation? And it comes as a combination of things, right? One is we need a very effective kind of training, open source training source code, right? Right now, I mean, there's like few versions, but we've actually been playing with Megatron, right? And it's like pretty complicated to like do some modifications. It's pretty hard to spin up. So like you need something that's like really easy to spin up, really effective. Ideally, you have a way where somebody can just either write a model or even GPU kernels, click a ship button, and then it can if the community supports it, it spins up on a bunch of machines on the cluster. And so you need some kind of almost like sandboxing that we have for smart contracts, like some approach like that. Then you need indeed a way where, like, let's say you have an interesting idea, maybe you test it out on the smaller model, right? On a very like high quality data, so you can see like how it performs compared to other ideas, right? And then if it works, then community kind of almost like gives you a budget to train it on a bigger model. And it is actually kind of like how some of these companies, big companies internally work, right? You train on one GPU or like on one kind of machine with 8 GPUs, and then if it works, you can go and kind of request more resources to train on a bigger cluster, and then bigger and bigger, right? Like you prove at every size that actually works before going to next size. And so we can actually do all this facilitation. We just need some of this core infrastructure to actually be able to do this and make it like somewhat permissionless for people to experiment, right? I mean, because you can come in and like rent one GPU for a day, which is going to be like $100, and then when you need to scale up, that's when you go and kind of like raise funds from community who that benefit from that model as well, be that through public goods or through kind of maybe more financing. And this is also something we've been thinking about, like how to create kind of public goods financing for open source models. There's some ideas, but we're definitely not ready for like getting that out. I don't know, Alex, if you want to add on this.
Sorry, I wasn't listening too carefully. I was reading chat, so.
Well, I'm saying more like how do we have competitive open source models? Like how do we get people to be able to experiment more freely?
Right. Yeah. So as you mentioned, the training infrastructure would need to be much easier than it is today. I think the like naturally innovation happens where there is demand, right? So like in terms of inference, in terms of fine tuning, we have outstanding tools today. But training, I guess there is much less demand for training because much fewer entities have capacity to train, and those who have, they have resources internally to build training loops, right? So training code is less developed in the open source, right? But if we do want to have innovation, in the open source being pushed forward, training will have to be part of it. Yep. And yeah, I think it boils down to how simple it is. Let's consider the example you were giving earlier with the you require 1,000 examples to see something, and they use triplets of facts. I don't remember if this is the same example or not, right? But like if I hear this example and I'm like, hey, did they account for this or did they account for that, right? Like let's say I have an immediate thought that something was not controlled for. Like how easy it is for me to immediately pull that experiment from a database of experiments and mess around with it, right? Like if I have to rebuild it from scratch, I effectively, given a limited resource of time a single person has, right? If they have to rebuild every experiment they want to mess around with from scratch, right? Or like if it requires a lot of effort to replicate the code base, even if it is published, they will only do that many, even if they pursue each of them, right? If that amount of work does not detract them from even pursuing it, right? But if it's somewhat standardized, easily accessible, right? Like Hugging Face style, but maybe even easier than that. Then of course I think people will tinker much more with it.
Yeah, so there sounds like we have like 3 or 4 new projects in AI Web3 that we discussed in this office hours. So for those who are listening, if you're interested in building any of this, apply on hdn.xyz. And thanks guys for joining. I think it was a great discussion, and excited to work with all of you guys going forward in this space. I think we all gonna make a ton of progress, and we're gonna start showing kind of skeptics of open source and user-owned AI soon why they are wrong. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thank you.